My name is Clara. I was 26 years old when I first met Nathan. At the time, I was living with my mother and younger sister in a quiet town just outside San Antonio, Texas. After we lost my father to illness, life tightened its grip on us, but we clung to each other like a raft in deep water. We didn't have much, but we had unity. I worked at a retail clothing store in the local mall. It wasn't glamorous, and the fluorescent lights drained me by the end of the day, but it paid the bills and helped keep our home warm. I still remember the wedding that changed everything. It was a Saturday afternoon in May. Sunlight streaming in through the tall windows of a flower-filled hall, music dancing through the air, and laughter echoing off the walls. My cousin Bianca was getting married, and the whole event sparkled like a fairy tale. I wore a navy blue dress my mother had helped me tailor the night before. It wasn't new, but it fit like it had been made for me. I was chatting with a few friends near the dessert table when I noticed him. He stood at the entrance like a statue, tall, dark-haired, quiet. He wasn't smiling, wasn't speaking, just watching. Occasionally his eyes met mine. There was something about the way he looked, still, serious, unreadable, that made me nervous and curious. While everyone else celebrated, danced, laughed, and toasted the future, he stayed at the edge of the room, unmoved, observing everything. I thought perhaps he was just shy or didn't know many people. I turned my attention back to the music, trying to shake the strange sensation. But every time I glanced across the room, he was still there, unblinking, unmoved, watching me like I was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. 2 days later, a message popped up on my phone. "Hi. I saw you at the wedding. Can we talk?" Froze. My heart skipped. "Who is this?" I replied. "I'm the man from the wedding. You wore a blue dress. You looked beautiful." I didn't know how to respond. Part of me was suspicious. Part of me intrigued. He explained he got my number from Bianca, asked if that was okay. I should have said no. But I didn't. I texted back, "Okay. We can talk." That was how it began. He introduced himself as Nathan, 32, real estate agent in the city. He said he wasn't good at parties, didn't have many close friends, and had recently gone through something that made him rethink his life. His messages were consistent. Morning check-ins, thoughtful questions, sweet observations. He asked about my dreams, my favorite books, what kind of tea I liked. He told me I was kind, that I radiated light, that he hadn't been able to stop thinking about me since the wedding. I started waiting for his messages, smiling when his name popped up. There was something addictive about his words, like being seen for the first time. On the third day, he texted something unexpected. "I want to marry you." I stared at the screen, confused. We hadn't even met again since the wedding. "You don't even know me," I replied. "I know what I feel," he wrote. "And I don't want to lose you. Please say yes." I didn't know how to respond. I told my mother. She looked concerned and said, "Clara, be careful. Sweet words are cheap. Time shows who a person is." But I was already falling for the version of him I carried in my mind. 2 weeks later I said yes. Our wedding was quiet, intimate. Only close family and a few friends stood with us that day in the small garden behind my aunt's house. I wore a simple white dress with lace sleeves that my mother had helped me pick. Nathan wore a gray suit and smiled at me the entire ceremony as though I were the only person in the world. His eyes didn't waver. And for a brief, flickering moment, I let myself believe I had stepped into something rare, something lasting. After the ceremony, he kissed my forehead and whispered, "I'll take care of you forever." I wanted to believe that. We moved into a small apartment in the city just a week after the wedding. It had 2 rooms, pale yellow walls, and a little balcony with cracked tiles. I decorated it with fairy lights and soft cushions, trying to make it ours. He insisted I quit my job. "You don't need to work anymore," he said. "I'll handle everything. Just be here when I come home." First it felt romantic. I made tea in the mornings, folded his shirts, filled the fridge with things he liked. He brought me chocolates, little trinkets. Nothing expensive, but always with a story. Once it was a keychain shaped like a cat. Another time, a pair of earrings in the shape of stars. He said they reminded him of my eyes. We laughed over dinner, shared stories in the dark, and walked hand in hand in the park on Sundays. He called me his light. I held on to every word. But slowly, that light began to flicker. He started coming home late. First it was work, always work. Just a client dinner. Or urgent meetings. He wouldn't touch the food I had made. He barely looked at me. His phone, which once lay openly on the table, was now always in his hand or in his pocket. He guarded it like it held gold. One night he came back after midnight. I had made chicken stew, his favorite. It sat cold on the table, untouched. "Where were you?" I asked gently, not wanting to sound accusing. He sighed loudly, dropped his keys on the counter. "Work," he said sharply. "Why are you acting like this?" My heart stung. But I said nothing. I didn't want to argue. I told myself not to overthink. That maybe I was tired. That maybe he really was stressed. But the unease kept growing. Then came the night I saw the truth. He went to take a shower and left his phone on the table. Unlocked. I sat staring at it for minutes. My hands cold. My chest tight. I didn't want to touch it. But my fingers moved on their own. There was a message thread from someone named Jenna. Opened it. I shouldn't have. But I did. And there it was, words I hadn't heard in weeks. Messages like, "You make me feel alive. I miss you so much it hurts." Photos. Selfies. Her in the passenger seat of his car, leaning against him, smiling like they shared 1,000 secrets. I couldn't breathe. He came out of the bathroom, drying his hair, and froze when he saw me holding the phone. I looked up. "Who is Jenna?" He didn't answer. My voice cracked. "You told me I was your everything." He stepped closer. "It's not what it looks like, Clara." But I had already seen enough. I sat on the edge of our bed, Nathan's phone still in my hands. My fingers were trembling, my throat too tight for words. He stood in the doorway, his hair still wet from the shower, a towel slung over his shoulder. His face was pale, and for the first time since I had met him, he looked small, vulnerable, but not sorry. "I trusted you," I said, barely louder than a whisper. "You told me I was the only one. Why did you lie?" He looked down, then away. "I made a mistake, Clara. Please." "It didn't mean anything. Didn't mean anything." I almost laughed, but there was no humor left in me. "You told her she was your everything. You sent her the messages I used to dream of receiving. You smiled with her. Smiled in ways you never smiled with me." He took a step closer, but I shifted away. He reached out his hand and said, "Please. I'll stop talking to her. I'll block her. Change. Just give me one more chance." I didn't answer. Couldn't. My heart was splintering from the inside out, and my body felt hollow, like I was watching this scene play out in someone else's life. I stood up slowly, walked to the bedroom door, and closed it behind me. I locked it. And then I cried like I hadn't cried since my father died. The pain was sharp, almost unbearable. I pressed a pillow to my chest and tried to scream into it, but my voice failed me. Every image of them together replayed in my mind like cruel theater. Her hand on his shoulder. His messages. His silence when I asked. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the dark, knees to my chest, waiting for the sunrise like it might save me. The next morning I packed a small bag. Just the essentials. Few clothes. My journal. My charger. I didn't even take the earrings he'd given me. I didn't want anything that reminded me of what I had believed too easily. I walked out of the apartment while he slept. I didn't leave a note. I didn't need to. When my mother opened the door, she looked confused, then worried. "Clara, what happened?" I fell into her arms, sobbing. I didn't tell her everything. Just enough. I need to stay for a while. She didn't ask for details. She didn't push. She just wrapped her arms around me and said, "You're home." The next few days passed in a strange fog. I stayed in my childhood room. The walls still painted the soft green the first had chosen when I was 14. My sister Sophie tried to cheer me up with jokes, cooking experiments and silly videos, but nothing made me smile. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Jenna. I saw his face as he looked at her in those pictures. The tenderness that I never got. Nathan called me every day. I didn't answer. He texted, begged, promised. He said he'd erased her number. That he was empty without me. That he hadn't eaten in days. That he'd do anything to have me back. But none of it touched me. It was like my heart had shut a door, and all his words were on the other side, shouting into silence. A week later, my mother sat beside me in the kitchen. Tell me, Clara, what really happened? I looked down at my hands. He was seeing someone else, even before the wedding. And he didn't stop after. I saw the messages, photos. He said he was sorry, but I can't erase what I saw. She took a long breath, then reached for my hand. It's hard. It's cruel. But now you have to ask yourself, do you want to fight for this marriage, or do you want to fight for yourself? I don't know, I whispered. I still love him, but I feel broken. She didn't try to fix it. She just nodded and said, whatever you decide, I'll stand with you. Later that afternoon, Nathan showed up at our door. I stayed in my room, but my mother called softly. Clara, he's here. I walked out slowly. He looked thinner, tired, and carried a small gift bag in his hands. I brought something for you, he said. I didn't reach for it. Please, Clara, he began. I know I hurt you. I know I destroyed what we had. But I love you. I've never stopped loving you. Let me prove I can change. Just one more chance. I looked at him, really looked. This was the same man who had called me his light. The same man who danced with me in the park and made tea when I had the flu. But also the man who lied, who chose someone else, who looked into my eyes and said, it's not what it looks like. I glanced at my mother. She said softly, sometimes people do change. Nathan stepped forward. Let me show you, Clara. I'll do whatever it takes. Please. Part of me, small, wounded, wanted to believe. I thought of the good moments, the ones that felt like home. I thought about our vows, the first time he kissed my forehead, the time he whispered, you make me believe in love again. And I also thought about what people would say if I left him this early. A shame. Questions. So I said, one last chance. His face lit up. He promised again that he would never hurt me, that he would be better. And I believed him. We moved back into the apartment like people trying to tape together a broken glass. The walls were the same, the furniture untouched, but the air was different. It was quieter, heavier, like it remembered the arguments, the silence, the night I had left. Nathan tried. I won't pretend he didn't. He came home earlier, brought flowers again, cooked dinner once, though he burned the rice. He talked more, touched my face gently, told me he was grateful for the second chance. For a while I tried to believe him. I cleaned the apartment from corner to corner, replaced the old sheets, moved the chairs, changed the photos in the frames. I tried to trick myself into thinking it was a new beginning. I smiled when he smiled. I said, I love you back when he whispered it. I nodded when he said, we're going to be okay. But something in me had changed. I couldn't laugh the way I did before. I couldn't trust the sound of his phone vibrating on the table. I couldn't fall asleep without wondering who he'd been thinking about all day. Every time his eyes drifted to his screen, something inside me twisted. And I didn't say anything. I kept the pain hidden behind carefully folded laundry and soft music in the background. I told myself I needed more time. Then one evening, he told me he had a work dinner. He left early, wearing the cologne I used to love, and came home after midnight. His breath smelled faintly of wine, and he said the traffic was terrible. He nodded. I didn't question him. But I didn't sleep that night either. The next day I went out for groceries. On my way back, I saw his car parked outside a cafe near the old bookstore. Slowed down. Inside the car on the passenger seat was Jenna. She was laughing. Her hand rested lightly on his arm. He was smiling. Not the careful, measured smile he gave me lately, but that easy, warm smile I hadn't seen since the early days. The one that used to belong to me. I stood there, a bag of vegetables in my arms, watching them like strangers behind glass. And this time I didn't cry. When he got home, I was already in the living room. He kissed my cheek. "How was your day?" I didn't answer. He walked toward the kitchen and I said quietly, "You did it again." He froze, slowly turned. "What?" he asked, his voice too calm. "I saw you," I said. "You were with her." He stared at me, then dropped his keys onto the table like the sound might distract me. Clara, please. It wasn't what it looked like. I don't know why I do this, but I love you. You're my wife. You're everything to me." He dropped to his knees like the first time, begged with the same words, the same tremble in his voice. But I didn't feel anything. Not anger, not sadness, just silence. A cold, wide silence where once there had been hope. That night I couldn't sleep again. I made tea and stood by the kitchen window, watching the street. I thought about the girl in the blue dress, who believed in love at first sight. I thought about the woman I had become, quiet, cautious, holding her breath through every promise. And I realized, this couldn't be my life. In the morning I packed. He watched me, sitting on the edge of the bed. "You're really leaving?" he asked. I zipped my suitcase. "I love you," he said. I didn't answer. I took one last look at the apartment, the fairy lights I had hung, the photos we'd faked smiles for, the kitchen where I once dreamed of forever. Then I walked out. I returned to my mother's house. She opened the door and didn't ask anything. Just took the suitcase from my hand and led me inside. I looked at her and said quietly, "I can't do this again." She didn't reply. She just made space for me. That evening I told her everything. The second chance. The laughter in the car. The emptiness in my chest. She took my hands and said, "You are brave, Clara. I'm proud of you." And for the first time in weeks I slept. Not because everything was okay, but because I had finally let go of something that wasn't mine to hold. I stayed at my mother's house longer than I had planned. Days turned into weeks. I slept in my old room, the one with pale green walls and faded posters from college. Sophie tried her best to lift my spirits. She brought me tea in bed, dragged me to watch silly TV shows, even dyed her hair blue just to make me laugh. And sometimes I did. Just a little. But most days I just stared at the ceiling. Or walked slowly around the neighborhood. Or watched the sky change color and thought, is this what freedom feels like? Or just the absence of pain? Nathan kept calling for a while. I stopped answering. Eventually he gave up. And when the calls ended, so did the last thread between us. Then one morning I was scrolling through job sites out of habit, not hope, and something caught my eye. A hotel in Lisbon, Portugal. Hiring receptionists. No experience abroad required. Just basic English, patience, and a willingness to learn. My heart skipped. Portugal. I didn't know anyone there. I didn't speak Portuguese. I had never even been on a plane. But the idea grabbed me like a lifeline. I turned the screen to my mother. "You want to go abroad?" she asked, her voice careful. He nodded. "I want to start again. Far away." She stared at me for a long time. "It won't be easy." "I know." She didn't stop me. She helped me gather documents, helped me renew my passport. Sophie cried when I told her. "I'll miss you," she said. "I'll miss you too," I whispered. I sold most of my clothes, my old phone, even a pair of gold earrings my father had given me. I didn't want to take anything that reminded me of Nathan. Not a memory, not a scent, not a regret. 2 days before my flight he came back. I was watering the plants in the garden when he appeared at the gate. He looked thinner, older, like someone who hadn't slept in days. "Clara," he said, stepping closer. "I heard you're leaving." "Yes," I answered. "Lisbon." I didn't reply. He exhaled slowly. "Can I say something?" Shrugged. "I know I hurt you," he said, eyes on the ground. I ruined the best thing I ever had. You didn't deserve any of it. I'm sorry. I didn't move. He stepped forward. Please don't go. We can fix this. Change. I'll prove it. I looked him in the eyes, steady and calm. I gave you 2 chances, Nathan. You wasted both. I love you, he said, voice trembling. I shook my head. You never showed it. Not in the way I needed. He said nothing. He knew it was the end. I turned away and walked inside. I didn't cry. The morning of my flight, my mother and Sophie drove me to the airport. We didn't say much. When we hugged goodbye, my mother held my face and said, "Go live your life. You're stronger than you know." And this time I believed her. The plane rose into the sky, and I watched as everything I once knew became small beneath the clouds. The pain, the betrayal, the girl in the blue dress, it all faded into memory. When I stepped out into the Lisbon air, everything felt new. The language, the light, the way the wind carried the scent of the sea. I was terrified, but I was free. My new job was simple. Smiles at the front desk, checking in guests, learning Portuguese 1 word at a time. I shared a tiny flat with another girl named Ines who worked nights at a bakery. She didn't ask questions. She just let me be. We made pasta together, walked along the ocean, sat in silence that didn't need to be filled. At night I wrote in a notebook. I wrote about the girl I used to be, about the mistakes I forgave too easily, about the woman I wanted to become. Sometimes I missed my mother. Sometimes I missed the man I thought Nathan was. But I didn't miss the pain. I didn't miss wondering. I didn't miss being invisible in my own home. One evening, I sat by the ocean as the sun melted into pink and gold. The waves touched my feet. The wind played with my hair. I whispered to myself, "You did it. You chose you." And for the first time in a long, long time, I smiled, not because someone gave me a reason, but because I had finally become my own. Months passed in Lisbon like pages in a book I wasn't trying to finish. I woke up early, walked to work with the smell of bread in the air, and greeted strangers in a language that was slowly becoming familiar. Life was quiet, small, and beautifully mine. I no longer flinched when my phone buzzed. No longer waited for words from someone who had once promised the world and delivered ashes. Nathan became a memory, not a wound. His name no longer lived behind my teeth. His voice no longer echoed in my sleep. Ines and I became close. She never pried, never asked about the past. But one night, while we were washing dishes, she looked at me and said, "You seem lighter now." Paused thinking, then nodded. Because I am. I was no longer that woman waiting by the window. I was no longer trying to make myself small to fit into someone else's idea of love. One day after work, I walked past a flower shop near the tram station. My feet stopped on their own. Inside, bouquets stood like soft warriors. Roses, lilies, peonies, quiet and waiting. I stepped in. The woman behind the counter smiled. I picked a single rose. Deep red. Simple. Alive. "Gift?" she asked, bagging it gently. "Yes," I said. "For myself." That night, I placed the rose in a glass jar by the window. The petals caught the last light of the day, glowing like hope. It wasn't about the flower. It was about what it meant. I was no longer waiting to be chosen. I had chosen myself. I sat by the window, legs curled beneath me, watching the city lights flicker. Somewhere far away, a version of me still stood in a blue dress at a wedding, looking at a stranger and calling it fate. But this version, this Clara, she no longer confused silence with peace, attention with love, or promises with proof. She had walked away, not because she was cold, but because she was finally warm enough on her own. And that, more than any romance, any vow, any ring, was the most honest kind of love she had ever known.